Somia una piscina com la que té al costat, blanca, neta, que es difumina, dibuixada al llapis, amb aquarel·les. O bé un hackney, tot de tendals, de colors i tauletes amb gots llargs. En una hamaca blanca hi ha una dona amb ulleres fosques que pren el sol. És l'Helena. S'adona que la mira, somriu, aixeca les ulleres fins deixar-les sobre els cabells, el mira i obre els llavis com si parlés, però no emet cap so. I tot i que no se li sent la veu, diu: em molesta que no vulguis fer l'amor amb mi. Fer l'amor! L'Humbert fa burla de l'expressió i es llança a la piscina, fins la qual tot és càlid i blau clar, i pot nedar estona i estona sota l'aigua sense que li calgui sortir a fora a respirar. És tan fàcil respirar sota l'aigua. L'únic que s'ha de fer és obrir la boca com els peixos fora de l'aigua. Així com aquests, perquè l'aire els és un medi estrany, moren d'una manera irremeiable, ell respira la reflexió. Pensa: llàstima que aquesta piscina sigui dibuixada i que no m'hi puguin arribar els sons de l'exterior, encara que una piscina de debò els sons tampoc no m'arribarien. Quan treu el cap fora de la superfície, l'Helena, asseguda a la vora i xipollejant amb els peus dins de l'aigua, se'l mira des de darrere d'unes ulleres fosques i amb un fons de desert i barbers que canten. Tu una pamela de palla. M'estimes? Pregunta. Per tota resposta, l'Humbert li mossega un peu i tot es fa molt lent. Diu l'Helena: de vegades penso que no m'has estimat mai, que per tu només soc com aquell trampolí de la piscina. L'Humbert pensa: quina imatge més bona, el trampolí de la piscina. Com si tingués molts significats i nivells de lectura. Sent que algú riu, contempla el trampolí, però el sol li fa mal als ulls i ja torna a ser dins de l'aigua amb els pulmons plens d'aire. Observa les bombolles que li surten dels llavis, pensa: ara quan surti a la vora de la piscina tindré una cervesa. Per surt l'Helena somrient, li acosta una gerra de cervesa freda, amb bromera blanquíssima que decota, cau a l'aigua i la taca de colors que no hauria de... Mentre es veu la gerra, l'Helena li pompa del front. Potser s'està sempre així. Torna a enfonsar-se l'aigua i pensa: quan surti, vull que aquesta casa que ens envolta, la casa on vis, no hi sigui. Vull ser una platja. Surt i aixeca els ulls. És en una platja. Ferit pels rajos de sol, torna a enfonsar-se. Quan surti, vull veure en algun racó la figura d'aquest Hackney en sol. Quan surt, veu en un racó del cel, un cel molt a prop, de cartó, una figura de Hackney, que es desfà, com fum. Cada cop que surt, el sol li fereix els ulls. Si pogués viure sempre dins de l'aigua, podria viure-hi sempre, si no fos que cada cop que surto, la llum del sol em fereix els ulls i com més i més m'hi estigui, i més trigui a sortir-ne, més em ferirà, fins que arribarà el moment que sagnaré com un sant Cristo, com una dona que menstrua, com un ferit de guerra, com un peix al cove. Hi ha un home que salta per la finestra i cau damunt d'un matalàs de Croàcia, corre carrer avall, la mort és tristíssima, si pogués amagar-se en una ombra. Estar amagat en una ombra és com no ser-hi, només el poden agafar o tocar si és el sol. I aleshores li toca parar, envoltat per les sorres d'un desert al centre del món, amb el sol vermell i les ulleres fosques amb muntures de colors de les noies que passen per la carretera en bicicleta cap al poble i no hi arriben mai perquè es perden per senders de terra, marge avall, rodant muntanya amunt, aquelles noies que hi ha a les fotos de l'Helena, d'adolescent, assegudes en prats amb faldilles curtes i sabates de taló alt, somrient sempre, amb pantalonets i mitjons, amb aquests llavis de flames que al mateix temps que fan morir de gust, abrasen.
When people try to analyze your work and speak of it in serious articles, what is your response to that?
Well, there's no response as you are at home and what you do is reading the article and thinking, well, Cabrera Infante once said there are two kinds of critics. The one that say that your work is great and they are good critics, and the bad critics that are those who say what you write is shit. So that's it. What's the response? I don't know. What's strange is when you find a journalist that asks you to explain your work. So why did you wrote Look at the Air, and what was your mission or your obsession or your idea in writing the book? I think you have no idea. I don't know you, but yeah, you wanted to write this book. When they ask, when they try to find why you have done that this way or the other, I think that's far away from you. A writer is a writer, and there are many writers that that what they don't want is to write, but what they want is to become a writer. That's different. If you want to write, you write whenever you can, wherever you can. You write books, you write short stories, you write novels, you write on the papers. And there's that other kind of writer that's what wants is to become a writer, and that one is the one that's interested on analyzing his or her own work, because that's what will make him secure of his personality. And in modern art, I was astonished when Antoni Tàpies, the Catalan painter, become obsessed on writing books about his work. You have to paint, and don't write books to defend the kind of work you are doing. That means that you are so insecure about your work that you have to build up a fortress to defend yourself. And then when they say you have to write it this book that way, not the other. Well, write it
when they say you should have written it
that way, or yeah. And excuse my English, which is awful, but I don't know. Yesterday I began talking English after a long period of a mental disorder which doesn't allow me to do it. And now I'm recovering, and you may think that I'm a little moron, which probably is true, but I will do it as best I can.
It's more interesting to hear English spoken than you speak it. More interesting to hear English spoken your way than what we're
just ordinary English.
Yeah, no. Yes. That's when you go to a restaurant and you ask for this wine or that other wine, the waiter or the waitress always say, "Excellent choice." whatever you ask for, that's excellent choice. So you speak English like shit, but well, that's better than our brain.
What is it? You started out as a painter, and didn't you do that at the beginning? So you had the idea of at least studying and writing about painting. How does that link up to how you work as a writer? I mean, did paint go on the canvas and then you see what was going to happen next, or because I think you've described writing a little bit like you start the writing and you don't know where it's going, and
You mean in the novel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wrote this novel in New York because I got a grant from a private foundation. I wrote that year. It was great for me because I got 2 grants. And for a person who hasn't had any studies, I mean, not going to university and everything, getting 2 grants in just 1 year, that's top of the hit. Then I got 1 grant to write a novel, which was this one, and another one to study North American writers, which in those early 80s were hell. I mean, in Europe, everybody was wearing, was long birds, and everybody was Trotskyists, and if you were not Trotskyist, you were Maoist, and if not, you were anarchist. So Americans were imperialists from the first one to the last one, and North American literature was awful, that can be. And well, I asked for a grant to see what those bad capitalist imperialist Americans were writing. And I came here and I had those two things to do. I wrote the novel, and the novel at the beginning there were 2 piano players. that was the plot and the characters were. But as I love art and I went to galleries, not every day, but a couple of days a week. I went there. I realized that and New York in those beginning of the 80s were those years of the new expressionists. I don't know those Francesco Clementi and Julian Schnabel and all that thing, and the Mary Boone West Broadway and all that thing that was the new trend that was finishing, or the non-figurative art. Well, and that's when I changed the characters, and I thought they had to be painters, in part because I feel more secure in that field, because I know a little about the work.
But you paint yourself?
Yeah, well, I used to paint, and now I'm painting again. But I paint, but I will never ever show any picture to anybody.
Does that painter return get into the writing? Do you feel like something you do when you paint is here in writing too?
It got into the writing at the beginning, I think, because I don't know, when a writer began, writer is young, he's innocent, he fills its writings with a lot of adjectives and colors and things like that, and as I was always thinking in colors and shapes, and I think the first books there were maybe too much of that, but those first books were this one. But I don't know. I don't know how do other writers write, but to me, having ideas is writing it as fast as possible. It's like a sketch when you are drawing, and then going back into it and rewriting and changing, and also there's a kind of similarity. I don't know. Do you think that?
Especially you don't need an eraser, then you slap oil paint on top of oil paint, make it thicker and thicker. Then, you know, when the reason I asked that question is because in talking, there was often in conversation stories about painters. You think about them and have usually some sort of comic episode that has drawn your attention to this or that painter, and of course here in this particular book, which goes back to that era, I might mention in passing that the books that we have, very few translations we have, are from Quim's early work. We have very little of the more recent work, which we can only read in Catalan or in occasional translations in Castellano. If these are language. So in the transition now into the contemporary era, now that you've been working, what has entered and what's fallen away the way you think about writing? Any difference now?
I don't understand that.
Well, from these early books to the new ones, which we don't know, what would be guiding ideas as we approach them?
How have it changed?
Yeah.
I've changed. Life has changed me, or my life has changed. Now I'm a little bit older than 30 years ago, and The settings of the stories I write are different. 3 years ago, there were most of the stories were in bars and people flirting, and lately my world has become darker, and there's how do you call that? Residences.
Old age homes.
Old what?
Old age homes.
Old age homes, yeah, well, that's it. And sanatoriums and things like that, because at my, around me, funeral homes, my life has changed, and I can't write any other thing that what I see or what I have. And structurally, I don't know. I think I've lately. Let's see. How can I spell it? I went into process of cutting sentences and writing fast. I mean, to make the reader go fast. And then later, I love to recrear-me amb la lentitud. The slowness and les sentències, les frases que
Then the sentences are getting longer.
yes, and even the bagarejar o no anar per la línia directa, sinó
Wonder and not go straight and not go
there was something I would never have done when I was young, because I thought that the stories had to be clear, economical, no wanderings, but later as I grow old, I love those wanderings and I don't know, detours, and we are describing the situation and then go out to the window and then go to the next bar, have a beer, and then come back into the room, and for the canonical way of telling stories, that's not a good idea. But
nevertheless, you see, last night we were talking about Henry James, and there we are, because this was his one of his great attributes was his wandering, multi-phrased sentences that we were, of course, joking about him somewhat last night after the long discourses, but he. You see, in your old age, you're finding your way to people like
Henry James. No. Well, I mean, that's not a medal. I mean, I should have read all the books that have been written, but I haven't. Because I never went to university. Nobody told me to read. If I had a teacher telling me you have to read this book and this book and this book and this other book,
you wouldn't have become a writer.
No, I wrote because reading wasn't allowed in my world. I read books, I read fiction, against the will of my parents. I read fiction, and I had, I don't know, Mark Twain, which I love, Dostoevsky, under the mathematics book text. Mathematics?
You get them under the math.
Yeah, and then I was reading this, and then I had my mother coming, and I covered the fiction book with that one, and then I heard the voice of my mother saying, reading so many novels will make you an idiot. But that's not so different from what a lot of people say about TV. When my boy, my child, my son was finding out, when I was a kid, I knew a lot of parents. I I'm not a very social person. I mean, I live alone, and I don't like meetings. I don't like parties. I don't like dinners with more than 3 people. But then I was obliged to meet some other grown-up people, and then I showed that they told their children the same words that my mother told to me. But not related to books, because those children that I knew when mine was a kid, they didn't read, they watched TV. And there was a word, too much TV is going to make you an idiot. So, TV is great. It's great because there's a great TV. There's a lot of shit on TV, but you go into a bookshop and there's a lot of shit. I don't know here because I've been here since yesterday or the day before, but in Barcelona, you go to the bookshop and there's plenty of mainstream fiction that. And most of those writers criticize TV. Oh, that's so awful. What are you presenting to the people?
It's an alternative. Yeah, it's not much. So the idea that you had to sort of write in order to learn to read, was that part of the experience too?
I had to write in order.
That writing helped you to read more because you're kind of choosing your reading based on your.
Ah, yeah. Well, the point is that as I had not a list of writers I had to read, I read for pleasure. I read this book and this other book. That book I didn't like it. I throw it away. When I was 14 years old, there was that Latin American boom. I mean, I became fascinated by Bioy Casares and Cortázar.
Did you read Onetti too? Onetti?
Oh yeah, and Garcia Marquez, the short stories of Garcia Marquez, great. Augusto Monterroso, Arreola. That's Latin America. I mean, those were the years where the Latin American boom was big. But from that, see, in Italy, you have Italo Calvino, Giorgio Manganelli, and in France, Raymond Queneau. There was a kind of books that made me excited, and the ones I didn't like. Because I had no responsibility, or I had no vida recta comptes a ningú.
You didn't have to give an account. I didn't have to give an account to anybody. I didn't have to answer to anyone.
Thank you.
But that excitement that you felt, was that kind of linked to wanting to write as well, so that the desire to write or the thinking about writing also affected how you would read?
That excitement?
Yeah, the excitement, was it partly because wanting to write, they were writing in ways that you appreciated as a writer or just as a reader?
I don't understand you.
I didn't
well,
either.
no, I'm translation to English, I guess.
Did writing?
Yeah, well, we talk about excitement and how much one wants to read, and if you're a young scholar and you get very excited about a certain field and you get into the field, that's one kind of excitement. And there's readers who just get excited perhaps by romances or by detective novels. But I was asking if there was something peculiar about a writer's form of excitement. What generates excitement in a young...
Okay, now I understand it. What generates excitement? It generates excitement, the feeling that you are reading something that goes a step beyond what has been done before. I mean, I don't know, you can always write about what's life and be precise as a picture. But I don't know how life is. So I'm excited about the book is because it gives me something else apart from that flatness of real life. And that was that story I told yesterday about having the possibility of having a person to fly through the window. In real life, I can't do that. But if you can express or you can describe the situation, making it believable, you can make a man fly through the window. And if this has any sense, it has to happen, because if not, it would be Walt Disney. But I don't know.
It's what I often said that I myself learned my realism. I understood what realism was by way of Kafka, because you make one transposition in order to say metamorphosis, and once that thing is done, everything becomes absolutely real and necessary. So that, for me, was the first genuinely realistic narrative that was Kafka metamorphosis.
I read something in, I think it's in Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicle, which I don't know, is a page or 2 pages when he kicks una clatellada brutal all the realistic writers.
No, he completely discards. He kicks out all of the.
Yeah. And when I was reading that book, in the middle of a story about people in Mars and Martian and everything with those trumpets, and having that kickoff against the realism that goes no far beyond itself, no, there is something more to me.
Yeah, sure. Please do. No, I was going to just say, in connection as thinking about Beckett and his Malone dies in the middle of that, with this old man dying in bed, and he's trying to write, and he drops his pencil, and he has to wait several days before he gets his pencil back. When he starts, he's missed all that important history, but he decides to look out the window and describe what he sees out the window, like anybody else would do, and he writes about the mountains and the hillside and so on. And after he's written about half a sentence or a sentence and a half, he said, "What the hell with all this fucking scenery?" And that's the end of that kind of writing. Nothing like that's going to appear in
I remember when I was young, I used to work, young, I mean 17 years old, I was to work in a print house. And on the way from home to the print house, I was reading the whole underground or train system. And I remember reading Beckett and laughing always, which is kind of curious, when people look at those writers that they consider critical and very no understandable, but all the not the plot, the maya, the web is humor. When Beckett, I don't know which novel is it, has some little stones and puts one of them in this pocket, the other one in this pocket, and then he begins changing this little stone from this pocket to this other pocket, and then this other one to this pocket, and then this one from this other pocket, in order to make all possible combinations from those 2 or 3, I can't remember that, little stones, in order to make all the possibilities. Yeah. When you have to read that, you can go back to the oh, Jenny was so sad because Joey had left her with her little child.
There's a great scene in Benzina.
Yeah.
There's a great scene in Benzina where Eddie is falling apart and he starts adding up things that are not the same. He adds the children playing ball.
Oh, yes.
You do something like that.
I remember that.
Okay. Well, you had a question, yeah.
Well, I think I've heard you sometimes talk about what the difference between journalism, because he was very, very well known as a journalist in Barcelona, and he writes every day, actually.
Yeah.
The difference between writing, how journalism has affected your style, but also the difference between doing journalism and doing fiction.
What's the difference? The difference is that I don't know. It depends on the column. Write columns, but many of those columns are well, they come out from a news, from some news. That guy over there has killed his son because he didn't like it. Okay, then you can reflect on that and try not to be saying what you want to say. And then there's some other kind of column where you describe a situation and you make it evolve. And then finally, sometimes you say, well, what? That's a poem? That's a short story? I remember when José María Aznar arrived at the general elections that brought José María Aznar to the power in Spain. I was writing a daily page for the periodico on I don't know, every day I was talking about this politician, this other. It was changing from one to the other because you had to talk about all of them in order not to be considered sectarians. But then there's one day when you cannot talk about no politician because it's a reflection day. So as people of Islam, and they have not reflected in his whole life in order to know who they will vote, they let you a day where you can reflect. But then a day I had to write down. Right. What was write down then? Okay. I had to write a page talking of no politician at all, in order not to influence those people who were at home reflecting. I'm going to vote communist, I'm going to vote right. And I began writing a piece about a politician that is so sure of himself. It's always said that a politician always votes for himself. Why? Because if he's honest, he thinks he's the best. So why vote another if he considers himself the most honest of all of them? But this politician said, well, I'm tired of that shit. That I will do something different. I will vote for someone else. And he thinks that it's something so new. And apart from that, he's so sure of his victory that one vote doesn't count. And the ending is not that vote did count. No, the ending is that he does so. He votes for another one. So proud of himself, as thinking as he is the first to have done this. Letting you think that there are many politicians that have voted some other option. Then I wrote down for the daily, my column, and when it was published, this is a story, and what, it's okay. And then took it out, and I published it as a story. So, it has happened a lot of times, because, you know,
you think one way and it was another Monzó.
No,
a lot of what the way your work is often described as being both very dark and very funny. That's the typical thing, which is what you were saying about Beckett. That there's kind of grim certainty about what's going to happen, a feeling of inevitability or kind of downside, but always capturing something funny about it. Can you imagine literature that is not funny?
No. To me, that's impossible. I don't know if you agree, but I think I have an idea of your opinion. See? But if there's no humor, to me there's no nothing. I mean, there's no literature, but there's no movies. There's humor is the minimal exigence. És el mínim que s'ha de demanar a una obra, a un llibre, aliment, perquè algú no es cregui el mateix.
It's the minimum, it's the least that you have to ask, it's the basic thing that you have to ask in the work.
You read a book about one of those books who take themselves so seriously, or one of those writers who, well, here I am, and the world will change. There will be literature until me, and then from me. And you read those books, and there's no sense of humor at all. And with humor, I don't mean jokes, and I don't mean I mean it's the little distance from yourself. And those books, in 20 years, has been forgotten. And I don't know here, but in Catalonia, Kafka is thought as the great master of what's the vivre, or however you say, language. Yeah, and all the world expresses it actually the darkness of the human soul. It's humor, it's pure humor. When at the beginning of the process there are those and you know the trial, there are those two men that go into the place where Joseph K. lives, and there's a description of the jacket they wear, and Kafka says it was one of those jackets. Caso, no says no caso, of course, because of bracket in those years there was no caso where. They said it's one of those travel jackets, maybe. With plenty of pockets that you don't know what there's what's for, what are they for? That little and everything from well. I want to say is that if there's no humor, there's no nothing. You look at movies. All good movies. There's a little distance from thinking I'm the one who's you cannot name a single novel or movie, a great movie or novel, with no humor, and it can be a tragedy, yeah? But
that's the enormity of the tragedy is one of the titles here, Magnitude is called in Spanish. Of course, it's a story about a man with a perpetual erection, which is, after a lot of difficulty in achieving an erection, that is typically embarrassing thing. Once he achieves it, he can't get rid of it. And he enjoys it. Why not? And then until he finds out that he's suffering from a fatal disease, so even though he's got all this pleasure in this I don't know the verb here, but softening something softenable. I don't know. But that it carries its tragic side with it, and so it becomes a sadder tale, a darker tale. But that's the enormity of the tragedy, which is making a joke right in the title, and then. Sort of like these other authors we're talking about, the kind of humor remains in spite of its darkening quality, and that has to do with something like sort of this sort of dry human response to whatever comes down, no matter how awful it might be, and that is in fact the enormity of the tragedy as one reads it, is the fact that life, no matter how grotesque or how happy or how dramatic, is nevertheless a joke in the end. That's the final enormity of the tragedy is the that no matter how tragic it ends up, like a joke. That's what death amounts to. That's the final punchline. Is there, you think about, you very much kind of opposed romanticism and typical this kind of belief in, kind of grand belief in oneself, what one is capable of as a writer, and find in fact that romantic attitude can be threatening. Can comedy be threatening? Threatening?
I think
Yeah. But can comedy itself be threatening? That is, is there any time when comedy doesn't work? Let's say it's too much threat, or is it only a threat to those who like that sense of humor?
Comedy? With comedy, you mean?
I'm leaving it open to you to decide. You're talking about humor and talking about comedy. I'm sort of leaving it open to you to distinguish if you want.
But you mean comedy in books, movies, and what's comedy?
Just the attitude toward life of comedy. But yes, a book that might prove threatening because of the to some people.
I don't know. Maybe to those that doesn't accept comedy as a way of thinking life. I don't know if that's an answer or what it says.
Pardon? Yeah. Well, satire can feel dangerous, especially if it's assaulting some institution or other. Is it, if it's threatening, is it a weapon that you feel one can use as a writer?
In comedy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
to use it as a weapon.
You cannot use melodrama. You say that? Wait, you cannot use melodrama. Like nobody with a little something in here can accept melodrama as a threatening weapon. Of course, there's only comedy. Tragedy, what's tragedy? If there's no humor. I don't know if I am answering your question, but to me it's only comedy. There's nothing else in the world, in the art. Even when you look at pictures, I mean pictures. I'm sorry, art. It's always that little distance, the little point of humor. What has been the modern art since they began, since they tried to forget all figurative art, it's been humor and humor and humor. Even, I don't know, the conceptual art has been humor upon the humor that was pop art and upon the humor that was abstract art.
Yes, let's do it. Anybody would like to ask questions? We've been dominating here and carried away with getting this room for questions.
I was wondering, you talked about the writers that you started reading when you mentioned Dostoevsky and you mentioned when you came across Latin American writers. I was wondering about the Catalan writers, and when did you start reading them, and who were the ones that caught your attention?
The ones that caught my attention, let me see. There was those writers that I will tell you the names, and I will try.
When did you start reading them?
I began reading them when I was, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 years old. And the ones I loved were Joli Sarsanedes, Pere Calders, Francesc Cabal, Rodoreda.
Could you read them in Catalan at this time? Could you find the
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, you find them. That book by Sarsanedes is called Mythos, and it was published in a small collection called Selecta, which I found in second-hand bookshop. But the others, well, you could find them. And there were kind of authors that had been a little mainstream goods. Neglected by because of the political situation. I mean, there was the Franco regime, and then Catalan literature passed through resistance era, and well, what they had, they couldn't do anything else. I mean, I understand that position, but that position was also bad for literature, because books were only valued if they had a strong political commitment against the regime. So you could find books that had no interest at all, but they had the 3 drops of feminist activism and 2 drops of national resistance against the regime, and 5 drops of proletarian fight against the bourgeoisie. And then the book was perfect. It was an absolute shit, but it was perfect because that's what it was. So what happened? The writers that wasn't in that field, in that way, that thought that you wrote or you write because you want to write, were a little bit neglected. And Sarsanedes wrote not too many books, but Pere Calders was absolutely neglected until Franco died, and there was a troupe of theater people that built up a great comedy with its short stories.
About humor, we talked about humor, and I know humor is universal, but do you think that there is something characteristic of Catalan humor?
No, not at all.
Like some cultural wink, something that perhaps are more funny, or as a Catalan you can understand that there's a twist.
No.
Sometimes there's a context.
something like this?
No, I mean, I don't even understand that, you know, that they say British humor. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I see a lot of or I read a lot of books or movies or TV shows in America that they use a kind of humor that cliche-minded people say it's British humor. I think there's no British humor, there's no Catalan humor, there's no I don't know. I think you have to understand I mean, if there are political you have to know I'm talking to you about Mr. Smith rapidity. Well, you have to know who this guy is in order to understand I read every week, well, every day. I open the Onion page in my computer, and it's great. But which kind of humor is that? In Catalonia, we had a magazine, weekly magazine, which was called Albert Negre, that's the black sheep. In the 30s, before Franco arrived, that I wasn't loved. Well, I wasn't born. But I bought the whole pack, and when I was young, I read it from the first letter to the last one, and I was astonished how clever those people were. And now, when I read The Onion, it's the same thing, but a giornata.
Postponed. Later in...
Yeah, but, written as a whole is now. I mean, there are videos, there's mockery, or there are parodies of TV shows, but in the 30s they couldn't do that because there was no TV, it was not, but it's the same kind of humor. So what's that? Everybody says, well, The Onion is that Jewish New York humor. Yeah?
Or anything.
Well, no, come on, I've seen this everywhere in the world. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Yes, I have a linguistic curiosity. When you read Latin American writers, do you read them in Spanish or in Catalan or French?
No, in Spanish. There has been little Catalan translations of Latin American writers. I remember that there was a translation of 100 Years of Solitude into Catalan because García Márquez asked for it, because he had sold 1 million copies of that book, and his publisher told him, well, 1 million copies, asked him, what do you want, what present do you want to celebrate this 1 million copies? He said, I would like to have my book translated into Catalan, because that's the language of the city where I live, and maybe it's the only language it hasn't been translated to. So it was translated as Sentence Solitude. But
you've translated several authors into Catalan.
yeah.
Are you still interested in translation? Do you plan to be translating more?
No, I used to translate into Catalan because well, I needed the money, and you don't know how tight publishers are. So they get, sometimes they get grants to translate somebody from another language to Catalan, and the translator earns the same as it earned it 20 years ago. So I sometimes translate theater because I love dialogue. And when I write novels or stories, I don't use very much dialogue. I love it. And translating dialogue for theater, it's kind of, I hate that word, but challenge. I hate challenge myself in that word, but because obviously somebody is a challenge. But I love dialogue, and if it's written in another language, and I have to translate it, and I have to fight against the impossibility of making it believable.
One thing you haven't talked about at all is love, eros, love.
Love?
Yeah. You surely don't suppose that love can be comic.
Can you come in? Oh. I mean, I asked you, I think, yes. I don't know, what love is. You think that, what's the other word? One is God, the other one is love, the other one is happiness. There are three words that are, that refer to nothing. Three words that God, happiness, and love. Love is being horny, but I don't know, with a little with a tie. Something like that. Happiness with a tie. Whenever I've met someone that's happy. Well, what I can say from the persons, they're good. Say, I'm sorry about you. Sorry for being so happy because. And then the other one, God. Well, it's an idea the mind has been. Oh yes, there's something. Both ourselves. There are all three words that has. This is a table, this is a book, this is a glass, but happiness, love. But you are funny thing, yes, that's it.
I have a question. Would you talk about why you rewrote Benzina? Why you rewrote Catalan?
I rewrote it because...
And the other books that you also went back over.
Because when I began writing, I was young, and that has something to do with Catalan language. Writers came from decades of literary language which was frozen, because with that Franco regime, nobody had the courage of getting it down to the street. And when I wrote those books, I wasn't either. So when I felt capable of doing this, I rewrote them. But that's nothing of the characters. English speaking person or Italian speaking person.
Well, it doesn't show up in that, but it's interesting that you did feel the need to go back and reshape the language to bring it into a more modern. Anyway, well, it was interesting to me because I had to rewrite the translation. I think we've been asked to wrap up. May I also thank the Deutches Haus once again and the World Voices Festival, and recognize my wonderful colleagues from the Institut Ramon LLull, Carlos Tourné, who's been bringing Catalan writers to the World Voices Festival since it began, and the director of the NYU, who's come to accompany the authors, Quim Monzó and Robert Coover, who's my colleague here in New York, the television and the to all of them for their contribution to the context.